story begins with a man named Tosin, who is with two women after having sex when his phone rings. He answers with a casual hello, but is startled when he hears someone pleading for help. He responds, confused and dismissive, before the call ends abruptly. The next morning, people are engrossed in their phones, watching the news about a tragic event from the previous night. Mrs. Okafor arrives at her company, where an employee shows her a disturbing video featuring a woman with a gun. Mrs. Okafor is devastated and begins to cry. Meanwhile, Tosin rushes to meet Kemi, who has been arrested. At the police station, an investigator shows Kemi incriminating evidence and warns her that his impatient partner could handle her harshly. He advises her to cooperate. Outside, Tosin argues with officers, demanding to see his sister. Inspector Daniel intervenes, telling Tosin only a lawyer can see Kemi. Tosin insists that Kemi will talk to him, and the inspector allows it, hoping to get a statement from her. In the interrogation room, a camera is set up to record Kemi's statement. Tosin, visibly upset, asks Kemi why she did such a thing. Kemi, tearful, insists it was a mistake. Tosin angrily retorts that what she did goes far beyond a simple mistake. He reveals that people are calling her names like psycho and witch. Kemi begs him to understand and help tell her story, hoping someone will listen and understand her side. The story flashes back to a few months earlier. Tosin and Kemi's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Akintola, are arguing. Mrs. Akintola is upset because her husband embarrassed her at a party by revealing she bought her own bag, contradicting what she had told her friends. Mrs. Akintola, wealthy herself, advises Kemi to marry a rich man to avoid similar embarrassment and ensure her happiness. Kemi, placating her mother, agrees. In another scene, Dozie Okafor, a wealthy man, has his wallet stolen by a pickpocket in a perfume store. Kemi, also at the store, offers to pay for his purchase. They strike up a conversation, and Dozie invites her to dinner. At the restaurant, Dozie impresses Kemi by reserving the entire place. They talk about their lives, with Dozie revealing his strained relationship with his work-focused mother, and Kemi mentioning her job at her mother's fashion house. Despite an unpleasant incident where Dozie insults a waiter, Kemi overlooks the red flag, caught up in the romantic evening. Elsewhere, Derek, an app developer and friend of Tosin, struggles with his code but eventually succeeds and excitedly shares the news with Tosin. The next morning, Tosin's father discusses a business deal, and Tosin reveals he is working on a big project, promising success. Kemi's morning routine is interrupted by her mother showing her a blog post about her date with Dozie. Kemi explains the date went well, but her mother insists she should focus on the fact that Dozie is wealthy, dismissing Kemi's concerns about his anger issues. At Dozie's house, he and his mother have breakfast, highlighting their distant relationship. Dozie asks for a significant amount of money for his business, which his mother agrees to without question, emphasizing her trust in him. Later, Kemi and her mother prepare for a fashion show when Dozie calls, inviting Kemi over to relieve her stress. They spend romantic time together, solidifying their relationship. The scene shifts to the Akintola household, where preparations are underway for an important guest. The house manager ensures everything is perfect. During dinner, Mr. Akintola attempts to engage Dozie in conversation about his work, but Mrs. Akintola interrupts, belittling her husband. Tension rises when Dozie berates a servant for serving him with the left hand, showing another glimpse of his temper. The family is taken aback by his outburst, particularly Tosin, who watches in shock as Kemi tries to defuse the situation. A quick pause here. If you're enjoying the story so far, make sure to subscribe to Nigeflix and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Now, back to the drama. After the dinner, Dozie leaves, and Tosin's father waits in the living room for the rest of the family to join him. As they sit down, Kemi tries to excuse herself, but her father insists she stay. He confronts them about Dozie's condescending behavior at the dinner. Tosin's mother defends Dozie, claiming he was right to reprimand the staff. Tosin also expresses his dislike for Dozie. The next day at his office, Dozie pleads with a client to be patient with a delay caused by server issues, but the client decides to move their business elsewhere, causing Dozie to lose a significant contract. Meanwhile, Tosin works on his lyrics when his father interrupts, urging him to find a meaningful job. Tosin insists his music career is legitimate, sharing a dream he had of receiving industry acclaim. His father, though skeptical, agrees to be patient. Kemi and Dozy plan a dinner at home, but Dozy changes it to a club outing to introduce her to his friends. At the club, they encounter Inspector Daniel, who earlier interrogated Kemi. Kemi gives Daniel her business card, which angers Dozy, especially after he sees her dancing with Daniel. Derek, Tosin's friend and an app developer, struggles to market his app and considers selling it outright. Tosin offers to buy 85% of the shares, seeing potential in the app's ability to digitalize livestock farming in Nigeria. Tosin finally seems ready to engage in serious business. Returning from the club, a drunken and angry Dozy confronts Kemi about giving Daniel her card and dancing with him. He drags her upstairs, accusing her of trying to seduce Daniel. The next morning, Kemi hides her bruises from her mother, who discovers them anyway. Her mother advises her to endure Dozy's behavior for the sake of their relationship and future wealth. Dozy sends Kemi gifts and flowers to apologize for hitting her. They make up, and he invites her out for lunch. Meanwhile, Dozy's mother questions him about his business progress and scolds him for losing a major client. Dozy apologizes and promises to do better. Kemi visits Tosin to discuss Derek's app, which she believes has great potential. Tosin meets with a financial advisor and receives an invitation to pitch the app to a board. However, Dozy loses another business deal and asks Kemi for 150 million naira to secure an audience with a minister who can help him. Kemi reluctantly agrees to sell her mother's property to raise the money, believing Dozy will repay her before her mother finds out. Tosin and Derek pitch their app to investors, receiving a $1 million offer, which Tosin declines. Later, they discover that Dozy has stolen their app's code and is launching a similar product. Tosin confronts Kemi, who admits she gave the app to Dozy. Furious, Tosin disowns her and vows to take legal action against Dozy. Kemi, now pregnant, tells Dozy, who coldly orders her to abort the baby. He beats her severely, causing her to lose the baby and suffer injuries that leave her unable to have children. She wakes up in the hospital, devastated by the news and knowing Dozy abandoned her there. Kemi returns home, lying to her parents about her whereabouts. Her father wants to call the police, but her mother fears the impact on her business. Kemi and her mother cover up her injuries and argue about the sacrifices they've made. Kemi reveals she sold her mother's property to help Dozy, leading her mother to have a partial stroke. Tosin reconciles with Kemi after their mother's stroke, but the stress drives Kemi mad. She confronts Dozy, drugging his food and tying him up. Kemi goes live on Instagram, torturing Dozy and ultimately shooting him, claiming it was an accident. This incident leads to her arrest and questioning by the police. A year later, Tosin successfully launches an app and thanks his supporters at a dinner party. He receives a letter from Kemi, written from her cell, in which she apologizes for her mistakes and accepts the consequences of her actions. Tosin reads the heartfelt letter, and the story concludes with a sense of closure and reconciliation. Are you a movie enthusiast looking for quick, clear, and enjoyable recaps of your favorite films? Look no further. At Nigeflixes, we bring you the best movie recaps. Subscribe now and relive the magic with every video.